Welcome back, Focus Learners. Today we are diving into a totally mind-bending reality about human communication. Have you ever wondered why having all the evidence, all the data, and literally all the undeniable facts on your side still doesn't guarantee you'll actually win an argument? Just think about the last time you tried to win a disagreement with your partner or a roommate using pure, unadulterated logic. You probably laid out a flawless, completely factual timeline of events, and yet how did that actually work out for you? You probably still ended up being the one apologizing. Well, in today's explainer, we are decoding the hidden matrix of human conversation that causes this exact thing to happen. We're talking about frame control.
Seriously, I want you to think back to a time when you were completely factually correct in a discussion. You had your receipts, you absolutely knew you were right. Yet somehow, you walked away from that interaction feeling manipulated, cornered, or just totally defeated. So how does that happen? Well, it happens because most of us don't realize that the person who sets the underlying context of a conversation ultimately controls its outcome. The facts are really just passengers. The frame, on the other hand, is the thing actually steering the car.
To see just how powerful this is, let's look at a famous medical study from Stanford. Researchers looked at how highly trained, brilliant doctors made decisions about a specific surgery. When these doctors were told the surgery had a 90% survival rate, they overwhelmingly recommended it. But when the exact same statistics were presented to them as a 10% mortality rate, recommendations for the exact same surgery dropped significantly. Just think about how wild that is for a second. It's the exact same numbers, the exact same facts, but a completely different frame resulted in a completely different medical outcome from experts who, frankly, really should know better.
So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, the power of the frame. Second, spotting frame control tactics. Third, reacting versus responding. Fourth, asserting without aggression. And finally, number 5, the Socratic masterclass.
All right, let's jump into part 1, the power of the frame, defining the matrix.
To really ground this concept, we need to look at the groundbreaking 1974 work of sociologist Erving Goffman. In his book Frame Analysis, Goffman introduced this idea to microsociology. He defined a frame as the basic, implicit mental structures and relational rules that we use to organize our everyday experiences. It's basically the invisible lens through which we classify what is happening around us at any given moment. To put it simply, imagine you jokingly insult a really close friend. Because of your shared history, the relational rules, the frame, right, dictate that this is just play, it's banter. But if a total stranger on the street walks up and says those exact same words to you, the frame changes entirely. Now it's a threat. The words are identical, the facts of the sentence haven't changed one bit, but the frame gives the interaction its fundamental meaning.
Which brings us to an absolutely crucial point. Whoever names the situation owns the situation. Let's say someone asks you, "Why are you always so defensive?" Right there, they have just set a frame where your core identity in this moment is defensive. Now, human nature tells us to immediately start providing facts to prove we aren't being defensive. But the second you start explaining why you aren't defensive, you are answering a question inside someone else's premise. You have subconsciously accepted their version of reality. You're effectively telling them, okay, I accept that we are having a debate about my defensiveness. Even if you win that specific point, you've already lost the upper hand because they are the ones dictating the terms of the conversation.
Moving right along to number 2, spotting frame control tactics, manipulation signs.
So what does this actually look like in the wild? Here are the classic signs of conversational manipulation you need to look out for. First up, presupposition questions. We literally just saw this with the "why are you always so defensive" example. It traps you into proving a negative, forcing you to fight their hidden premise rather than the actual topic at hand. Next, we have false dilemmas. This is when someone artificially limits your options to box you in, like saying, "Are you with us or against us?" It completely ignores the possibility of any nuance. Then there's redefining your intentions. This one is incredibly frustrating. It's when someone tells you what you really meant, regardless of your actual words. They might say something like, "You're only bringing this up because you want to hurt me," instantly shifting the frame from a practical issue to your supposed cruelty. Also, definitely watch out for tone policing. That's shifting the focus from your valid factual point to how emotional or loud you seem, effectively neutralizing your argument by criticizing your delivery. And finally, positioning as the authority. This is a super subtle power play where they frame themselves as the unquestionable expert and you as the confused novice.
Okay, so how do we actually fight back against this? Think of it like conversational martial arts. Let's run a single scenario through all 4 steps to see how this works seamlessly in practice. Imagine a coworker tries to throw you under the bus in a big meeting by asking, "Why didn't you prioritize the client report like I asked you to?" Step 1, reject the premise entirely. You don't make excuses here.
A simple, "the report was not the agreed-upon priority," stops their frame right in its tracks. Step 2, ask the question behind the question. You follow up with, "What makes you say that I was supposed to prioritize it?" This brilliantly shifts the burden of proof. It forces them to defend their aggressive frame instead of you awkwardly defending your work ethic. Step 3, ignore and redirect. If they start rambling about how you're not a team player, treat their manipulative frame as completely irrelevant and just steer back to the facts. The timeline we agreed on was Friday, so let's talk about Friday. And if they keep at it, step 4, name the tactic. Expose the manipulation out loud. "It sounds like you're trying to shift the blame for this delay onto me, and I'm not going to engage with that." Awareness alone destroys their control, giving you the power right back.
Which brings us to number 3, reacting versus responding, emotional regulation.
The negotiation experts over at the Black Swan Group teach a core philosophy about maintaining control. There is a massive psychological gap between a stimulus, which is the manipulation, and your response. The difference lies entirely in whether you are reacting or responding. Reacting is an emotional reflex. It's impulsive, it's defensive, and it's usually tied to our past negative experiences. When you react, you are basically handing the other person complete control of your frame, letting their words dictate your heart rate and your mouth. Responding, on the other hand, lives in that critical gap between stimulus and response. It involves a deliberate pause. Taking just a single second before you speak allows you to regulate your emotions, approach the situation with genuine curiosity, and seek to understand the hidden why behind their behavior, all without sacrificing your own boundaries.
The legendary martial artist Bruce Lee honestly hit the nail on the head with this. He said, "Be like water making its way through cracks. Do not be assertive, but adjust to the object, and you shall find a way around or through it." You see, holding your frame doesn't mean being this rigid, unmovable stone wall that just shatters under pressure. True emotional control actually requires flexibility. By remaining calm and deliberate, rather than instantly reacting with aggression or defense, you maintain your autonomy. Flexibility, not rigidity, is what actually wins the conversation.
All right, moving on to number 4, asserting without aggression, setting boundaries.
Psychologists often point out that the chief difference between assertiveness and aggression is how well you take both your needs and the other person's needs into account. Let's look at a super relatable example. Say you've got an incredibly demanding boss who constantly texts you after hours. Step 1 is always self-soothing. Calm your emotions and take a deep breath so you don't send a fiery, career-ending text back in the heat of the moment. Step 2, use I statements to address it the next day. Instead of saying, "You never respect my time," which triggers immediate defensiveness, try saying, "I need to unplug in the evenings to recharge for the next workday." Step 3 is maintaining open body language. Keep your arms uncrossed and avoid aggressive staring eye contact if it feels too confrontational. You want to be firm but approachable. And finally, step 4, set communication boundaries. When that 8 p.m. text comes through again, it's perfectly fine to say, "I'm offline for the night, but I will make this my first priority tomorrow morning." You protect your frame, you protect your boundaries, and you keep the interaction highly productive.
And finally, number 5, the Socratic Masterclass, historical frame control.
For our grand finale, we are taking a trip back to ancient Greece to look at one of the greatest examples of frame control in human history, found in Plato's account of the trial of Socrates. Picture the scene. Socrates is standing before a hostile jury of 500 Athenians. He is literally on trial for his life, facing execution, formally accused of corrupting the youth and disbelieving the gods. But his real problem wasn't the formal charges. It was a decades-old negative frame. For years, rumors had circulated that he was a dangerous, atheistic wise man who used conversational trickery to make the weaker argument defeat the stronger. Now, the average person in this situation would totally panic. They would deny the rumors, frantically presenting facts to prove they weren't this dangerous wise man. But Socrates knew that defending himself against the label of wise man meant stepping directly into his enemy's frame. So instead, he executed an absolute masterclass. He took the exact weapon of his enemies, the label of wisdom, and used it to disarm them. He told the jury about a time his friend consulted the revered Delphic oracle, who shockingly claimed that no man was wiser than Socrates. But then, Socrates completely redefined the word wisdom right there in the middle of the courtroom. He explained that he investigated this prophecy by talking to politicians, poets, and artisans who all thought they were incredibly smart. Socrates realized his only true advantage, his only wisdom, wasn't dangerous scientific knowledge or some kind of dark magic. It was simply his humble awareness of his own ignorance. He knew that he knew nothing. In a single stroke of genius, he took the very frame his enemies used to attack him, entirely neutralized its negative threatening connotations, and transformed it into the ultimate badge of human virtue. He didn't just fight the facts, he systematically rewrote the reality of the entire courtroom.
So, what does this all mean for us? Well, here is the ultimate takeaway from this explainer. Most people just sleepwalk through their conversations, simply accepting whatever realities, premises, and frames are handed to them without a second thought. But now you know the matrix exists. So the next time you find yourself in a heated discussion, before you start frantically arguing the facts, take a breath, step back, and ask yourself, in this conversation, who is setting the frame? Because whoever names the situation owns the situation. Make sure it's you.